with that, I'm going to introduce our speaker. Pete Blank is the Northwest Ohio Restoration Manager for the Nature Conservancy. He has a bachelor's degree in Earth and Planetary Science from the Johns Hopkins University, a master's in Sustainable Development and Conservation Biology from the University of Maryland, and a PhD in Ecology from the University of Maryland. His graduate research focused on habitat restoration for grassland birds, and he now uses that background to restore habitat for birds and other wildlife in the oak opening regions of Ohio and Michigan. Pete is originally from Baltimore. He is a lifelong birder, loves to learn about anything in nature, and enjoys biking, camping, and kayaking. He and his wife, Erin, moved to Southern Michigan in 2018 to be closer to family, although I think he's going back to Maryland this week. So,
Oh, yeah, Virginia.
or Virginia, okay.
Yeah.
So without any further ado, Pete Blank.
Thank you, everyone. It's an honor to be here. I'm a member of Toledo Naturalists Association. I'm proud to be a member. Appreciate being asked to speak about the Sandhill Crane wetlands and what we do with the Nature Conservancy in Northwest Ohio and our oak openings program. There you go. If you're a member of TNA, you're probably familiar with the oak openings region. Just a little bit of background. The oak openings region is a 1,300 square mile area stretching from southwest of Toledo up to northwest of Detroit. This spans about 6 counties. And while the polygon there looks like it's one contiguous area, in reality, it's actually more patchy than that. If you were to go out and look at the soils and the water, it's a little bit more patchy, but that helps us sort of visualize it. It was TNA members like Mosley, I believe, that helped us first identify the oak openings region. And a little bit of geologic history. You might be aware that this region had these big glaciers that came down, and about 15 to 18,000 years ago, they retreated. And as they retreated, they left behind sand deposits, and the water started retreating to what is now Lake Erie. But the beach used to be out here, and a lot of sand was deposited right here in this green area. And we call this the oak openings region. We actually call that green blob there the green ribbon, and which is why we have a green ribbon initiative for protecting the oak openings habitats and region. You also might be aware that the oak openings is rich in biodiversity, lots of species here, lots of flowers, beautiful diversity. It's one of the most diverse areas in all of Ohio. Species like the blue spotted salamander, the Carner blue butterfly, the spotted turtle are all here. But it's not just one type of habitat. For example, here I'm showing a tall grass prairie. It's a variety of different habitats. For example, oak savannas. When the early explorers came across from through the Black Swamp, the Great Black Swamp, which was farther south of here, but not by much, and they were coming around Lake Erie and to this region. When they got through all of that swamp area, they found a region with lots of oaks and with big expanses between the trees, with lots of grass and flowers in between the trees, lots of space to move their wagons through. They called that region the oak openings. And we still have the oak openings savannas. A savanna is just lots of trees separated by big open spaces. We still have them today, but they're dwindling. We've lost 99% of the wet prairies. I'll talk more about wet prairies in a minute, but that is one of the major habitat types we're trying to restore in the oak openings region. We lost 98% of our oak savannas in Ohio and 90% of our oak savannas lost in Michigan, because of development, because of agriculture, because of how we currently live. But there are a lot of hardworking organizations and people working to protect this landscape. The Green Ribbon Initiative, as I mentioned, is a partnership of organizations trying to steward the land that we have in protection now, and to increase the amount of land that we have in protection, so we can help to restore this very important natural community area. Where I work at the Nature Conservancy, I oversee a restoration crew. We call it the Oak Openings Restoration Team or crew. And we use various methods primarily to deal with invasive plants. As you probably know, invasives are just everywhere. You can't really drive anywhere without seeing them. You can't really go into very many natural areas without seeing them. So we spend a lot of our time doing invasive plant control with methods such as herbicide spraying with backpacks, with brush cutters. The bottom left is our forestry mulcher. That's if it's really inundated with invasives, we're going to get out there and we actually mow right through those shrubs and mow them down. We're kind of resetting, we're kind of restarting the vegetation process if we have to bring that one out. Hopefully, we don't have to bring that out too often. That's more for like really places that have just gotten totally overwhelmed by invasives. And then fire. By the way, I do want to say, if you want to interrupt, please feel free if you have a question. I don't mind at all. I'll be asking you guys some questions towards the end of this talk anyway, so we could make it a two-way street. So speaking of fire, you may or may not, I don't know how many of you know much about what's going on with the Nature Conservancy, but about 5 years ago, our fire program was shut down. One of our key fire people left and took a different job. And then we had some rule changes in Ohio for the Nature Conservancy. So we haven't really done much burning since, I believe the last burn on Kitty Todd was about 2018. But we have great news. We haven't gotten the final approval, but it looks like we got the two key people that we need to do fire. We need somebody to approve our burn plans, and we need somebody to actually pull off the burn, which is called a burn boss. And we think we found those people, we think we found the funding, and we actually hope to have our first burn at Kitty Todd in 5 years, starting this fall. So we're really excited about that. I just got my firefighter type 2 training about 2 or 3 months ago, and we're doing another refresher next month. So we are gearing up for fire. It's not gonna be we're not going to be burning the heck out of the place yet. We're starting small. Funding is limited, so we have to sort of pick our battles and figure out where we think we have the funding and the time to really pull off burns. But we hope to be burning again this calendar year, which is really exciting for us. I've been with the Nature Conservancy for 3 years, and we've been waiting for this day for a long time. I mentioned the Oak Openings Restoration Crew. It's important to point out that we don't just work on the Kitty Todd Preserve. We have a preserve called the Great Egret Marsh. It's over by the Lake Erie. It's right across the street from East Harbor State Park, if you're familiar with that. It's in Lakeside Marblehead. It's about 140 acres. So myself and my colleague Ben Baumlitz, we help manage those two preserves for the Nature Conservancy. But a big part, more than half of our job, is to work with partners in the region, in the Oak Openings region, which is delineated by this red polygon here, and try to help them steward their lands. And right now, the biggest thing that they need help with is invasive plant control. And we have a lot of tools at our disposal, as I showed earlier, to deal with these invasive plants. In the last 3 years, this map is work areas that we projected to work in about 3 different, in 2020 through 2022. This is about 3,000 acres, and we worked on about 3,000 acres, just our crew, anywhere between 6 and 8 people that we hire during the summer. And we have a few people that work with us in the winter time too. So we're working on a lot of property that's not on TNC property. We work with Metro Parks Toledo. We don't do a lot of work with them for them because they have their own stewardship crew. Lorraine, if you're familiar with Lorraine, she runs her own stewardship crew. They hire people every summer, but we help partners that don't have a stewardship crew, that can't do the work themselves. For example, we work with Southeast Michigan Land Conservancy up in Michigan. We work with Wayne County Parks in Michigan. We were just over at Irwin Prairie a few days ago, although they have a small crew, but we were trying to help them out, although it got a little too wet, so we weren't able to do everything we wanted to do. But we do work with a lot of different partners in the region. And how many of you guys have been to Kitty Todd Preserve? Oh, fantastic. Well, then you know that it's been, you might know, it's been around for quite some time. The first tract was bought in 1972. That was you might have heard some people refer to the Schwamberger Prairie. That's kind of, if you're at the office and you walk straight back, that's Schwamberger Prairie. That's on the Trembach estate. We bought the property from Martha Trembach in 1972, and it came with the house, and that was Martha Trembach's house that my office is probably in one of the 2 bedrooms. It's not anything fancy. Come on in and visit us if you come to the Kitty Todd Preserve. We'd love the door. If usually somebody is there from about 8 in the morning till about 4:30 in the afternoon. And please come in. Barry was mentioning that the Sandhill Crane Wetlands doesn't have a bathroom. If you're over at the Sandhill Crane Wetlands or anywhere on Kitty Todd and you need a bathroom, come on over. We have a bathroom there. But the other thing that you may not know that Barry reminded me to say to you all is that about a year ago, we'd made the decision to open the gates all the time. So it was closed on the weekends and after we left, because there was nobody there. But we've put in some security measures. We put in some more fences, some more gates. And so now the parking lot is open sunrise to sunset, 7 days a week, if you'd like to come and visit and walk. And usually, like I said, 8 to 4:30, people are in the office. So it grew from 1972 to 1975, 142 acres, speed forward to about 2003, 620 acres, growing all the time. We're now at about 1,430 acres. I actually don't know. I don't think that number counts the recent 14-acre tract we just bought about 2 months ago. So I think it's actually closer to 1,445 now. So it keeps growing. And our Director of Land Protection, Terry Seidel, some of you may know Terry. He was active with the Toledo Naturalists many years ago, and he had my position about 20 years ago. Do you guys know Terry? Okay, so he's still with the Nature Conservancy, and we really appreciate him. He's taught me a lot, and he is still looking for places to purchase to make Kitty Todd bigger and stronger and better, especially places that might house rare and endangered or species that need a lot of protection. So here's our Kitty Todd Nature Preserve. In green is the TNC property, the Kitty Todd property. In yellow is the Metro Parks Toledo property. And I don't think I truly grasped until recently just how much land Metro Parks Toledo owns and protects that's not in the Metro Parks. They have, I think, 12 or 13 Metro Parks. 19, my mistake, 19. Well, a lot of land is not in a metro park and is not accessible to the public, and they're doing it because they're darn nice people trying to help make a difference and help out the Oak Openings region and help out in general, trying to protect land and protect habitat. So all this yellow up here, that's not open to the public. That's just maintained by Metro Parks Toledo. The yellow across the street from Kitty Todd, not open to the public, but a big patch of woods there. This is the airport here, just to give you a little bit of bearings. I don't know if these are open to the public. Then you get down here and you're closer to the Oak Openings Metro Park. So what a wonderful thing that is, that our Metro Park system is also, like the Nature Conservancy, looking to buy land and protect it, whether or not people are going to come visit it or not. I just think that's wonderful. So here's the purple area, the Sandhill Crane Wetlands that I'll be talking about for the rest of the talk. This is a 280-acre parcel that was bought from the Bettinger. I don't know Bettinger's first name. He was at the grand opening. At least one of the Bettingers was at the grand opening last May. But we bought that from the Bettinger family. And essentially what I'm here to talk to you about is how do you turn a crop field that big into a meaningful part of the Oak Openings. This is what it looked like about 5 years ago. Solid cropland. It's actually not tilled, which is good. No till is generally better. It's better for erosion, that kind of thing. But not a lot of wildlife habitat. I did my PhD dissertation on grassland birds, and I actually studied birds in crop fields, and I can promise you there's not many birds that use that. But how do you get from that to something terrific that protects habitat for wildlife? And we want to maintain the hydrology. Even better, we want to restore the hydrology. That field had been drained. I'll talk more about drainage tiles in a minute. That field had a lot of drainage tiles, has a lot of drainage ditches. Look at these drainage ditches along the outside here that are just taking the water off of the field and then flowing it out into the tributaries and then eventually into Lake Erie. We want to we don't want to just maintain the wetness. We want it to get wetter, because it wasn't just the Great Black Swamp that was full of water several hundred years ago and before. It was this area where we are now. These roads that we just drove here on, dry roads, a lot of that would have been submerged a few hundred years ago. So we're trying to restore the hydrology to the best of our ability. Can we convince the county to get rid of drainage ditches? No. And there's a lot of things we can't do, but on our own property, we're doing the best we can. And this one cracks me up. I found this photo just a few days ago. This is the Bettinger farm with a irrigation pump that goes down 260 feet into the ground. So how crazy is this? We drain the wetlands. We put miles and miles of drainage tile under that field to get the water off. We put drainage ditches all the way around it so we can farm it, and then we pump water back up and so we can spray our crops. How crazy is that? So we are trying to restore the hydrology to the best of our ability. We have some experience doing it. Have you all, some of you been to the Salamander Flats tract of the Kitty Todd Preserve? If you're at the office, if you just keep going west down Old State Line Road and then go down, I believe that's White House Spencer. It's right there on the side of the road. And we have some experience restoring a parcel with very little wildlife habitat value, very little resemblance to the original oak openings, and then restoring it back to a more natural oak openings community. So we knew we could do it, but when you deal with 280 acres and you're trying to deal with hydrology and it's a big undertaking. So how do you do it? You start with a lot of meetings. I don't want to pretend like I was here when these meetings were going on. I've been here with the Nature Conservancy 3 years. And I'm so honored to be here and working with them. But there were meetings out there about how are we going to deal with the water? How are we going to deal with the soil? What are we doing out here? So lots and lots of meetings. This is one of our really important guiding documents. It's the Brewer and Van Cat 2004 paper for the oak openings, and it gives the historic vegetation in the oak openings in Ohio, just Ohio, not the Michigan side yet. It was originally the oak openings were thought to be in Ohio. Then it was realized about 2/3 of the oak openings is actually in Michigan. So this just does Ohio, and this is a brilliant paper. I encourage anybody who's really into this stuff to look at it, because it shows what this area probably looked like 250 years ago when European settlers were coming through here. And we use this. So Kitty Todd is going to be, let's see, I got to get my bearings. It can be in there somewhere or maybe a little bit higher.
Did you repeat the paper?
Brewer and Van Cat, Brewer and VANKAT 2004. And so we look at this map, and I believe actually Kitty Todd is, yeah, there's Angola Road. So Kitty Todd is just about in there. We are just a little bit north of that. This is large, with 200 and some years ago, at the time of European settlement, this was largely wet prairie. I'll talk a little bit more about what a wet prairie is. This shows us kind of, if that's one goal, I mean, we can have a discussion about what the goal is, what we're trying to restore back to. But one idea would be to restore back to the time of European settlement. And there was a lot of wet prairie here. Some of you may know Tim Sheeter at Metro Parks Toledo. Tim and other people in the Green Ribbon Initiative have gone to a lot of trouble to do ecological modeling to try to figure out to expand the model, not just in Ohio, but expand it up to Michigan to predict what the areas either should be or were in the oak openings region, what kind of habitats were there, and then also to identify what we call PCA's priority conservation areas, which are outlined in black here. The Petersburg Prairie, we have the Irwin Prairie down here, we have this Turtle Hill Prairie up here. These are the areas that a bunch of smart people got together even before I got here and figured out these are the places we really want to do conservation in. These are our highest priority areas. So Kitty Todd and Secor Metro Park are in the Irwin Wet Prairie complex down here. And it was mostly wet prairie. There's also some upland prairie that's nearby. And so that's really key to recognize that 250 years ago, wet prairie and upland prairie were kind of the dominant landscape features in this area. What is wet prairie? Well, have you been to Irwin Prairie? That's probably the best example off of Kitty Todd that we know of that. And I think that Irwin Prairie, because of its history and because of the care and protection of it, is perhaps like a longer standing wet prairie than what we've got at Kitty Todd. And what's that?
Oh. It's the largest in the state.
Is it really? That's great. So it's wonderful to have. This is just like maybe no more than 2 miles from the Kitty Todd Preserve. It's wonderful to be able to go over there and see what's growing over there, see the hydrology, study the hydrology, and understand that the fluctuations in water are natural. We want to try to mimic those as much as we can on the Sandhill Crane wetlands. There are plants out here like the twig rush that grow here naturally, and we want to try to emulate that and plant similar species out at the Sandhill Crane wetlands. So we're using the Irwin Prairie as one of our major guides to restore the Sandhill Crane wetlands. And if you recall on the last slide, the region here, the whole complex was the Irwin Wet Prairie. So so that's one thing that we're trying to shoot for. The other one would be upland prairie. This is more sandy soils, a little bit drier, has lots of different flowers and a host of animals that use this type of prairie. So those are the two habitat types that we're trying to restore Sandhill Crane wetlands to. Now I want to stop here and just sort of explain that a bit. There are about 6 major habitat types that we're trying to restore in the oak openings region. They include oak savanna, wet prairie, upland prairie, oak barrens, sand dune barrens. So there's several different types, but based on the historic maps and the ecological modeling, the decision was made to focus on those 2 habitat types, upland and wetland prairie, in the Sandhill Crane wetlands. I know many TNA members have certain species they might be looking for. For example, I know there's some birders will come out to the Sandhill Crane wetlands and look for particular birds. I want to make it clear that we are not managing for a particular species. We are managing for these 2 habitat types. And we believe that, like in Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. So, and I have been in this field now for, I can't believe it now, but almost 30 years. And I can say for sure that I've seen this over and over and over again, that if you do build it, they often will come. Certainly, I mean, certain rare species or species that are that have a hard time dispersing from where they are, do have a hard time getting to certain places. But in my experience, there is a lot of evidence to show that if you get the right habitat, the species will come. So we're not doing a species specific restoration, we're doing a community type restoration. How do you do that? Well, you study a lot of things like groundwater. I'm not a groundwater hydrologist. I took groundwater. That was my hardest class. Good luck anybody gets through groundwater hydrology. So here is the Sandhill Crane wetland site. you see that on the west side, this is Rab Road here, and this is Angola Road here, if you're familiar with that region. This is before any restoration was done. It's really wet. It's a naturally wet site that collects a lot of rainwater and snow melt, on the west side. It gets a little bit more patchy and a little bit more upland in parts of the east and central and east side. So we don't want to change that too much. We want to maintain that wetland hydrology and bolster that. Soils. I'm not a soil scientist, but a lot of soil scientists went out there, studied what are the soil types, took soil cores, figured out what the nutrient loading is, figured out phosphorus, nitrogen, that sort of thing. A lot of soil science went into restoration of the Sandhill Crane wetlands. Aerial images, monthly from 2017 till we broke ground in 2020, to figure out, among other things, what is the natural hydrology of this site. So you can see on the March 2019, you see a lot of wet there, but in June, it's pretty dry in that same area. So we have this natural drying and wetting of that property. And we wanted to try to mimic that, but also sort of restore the hydrology, probably more to something like this year round, with more wetlands year round. Drainage tiles. I talked about drainage tiles before. This is Professor Kennedy Doro, who's at the University of Toledo. He used ground penetrating radar to figure out where the drainage tiles were. This is a map of the radar images, and he somehow, I don't know how, translates that and figures out from all that all these lines here were drainage tile that were in this field. This is not unusual. Like farms around here, and farms, I'm from Maryland, farms in Maryland, lots of farmers are using drainage tile. Used to be those old, I think like old clay tiles. Now they're just using the rubber hoses, but it's trying to get the water off of the land. And I was just talking to my supervisor this morning about this. Our goal with the Nature Conservancy is the exact opposite. We want to leave as much water on this property as possible. But first you got to figure out what's out there. We had 30 miles, Professor Doro found 30 miles of drainage tile underneath this property. We did not try to rip out 30 miles of drainage tile. That would have just been too expensive. So the bulldozers, when they were moving things around, they cut it where they could. When it was exposed on the surface, they grabbed it. But the whole point was to try to break up that network of drainage tiles and keep the water on the land as much as possible. So you take all of that data, that the soils, the hydrology, and you put it together into a design. The MAD scientists, MAD scientists, based out of Columbus, Ohio, were our engineers on this project, and they helped us put together this design. And as I said, we're trying to restore back to wet prairie and upland prairie. So they have tried as much as possible. The light green here in the middle, well, actually all throughout are the existing wetlands. We want to try to maintain those as much as possible. The blue areas are scrapes. Bulldozers would go down and scrape the earth, trying to create a depressional wetland. And then the yellow is dunes, where the bulldozers pushed up the sand and created dunes to mimic what might have been here hundreds or even thousands of years ago. So think back to what I said earlier about the geologic history of this area. When the glaciers retreated 13, 15, 18,000 years ago, they left behind a lot of sand. That sand's been blowing around for 15,000 years. Dunes and swales. This area should be dunes and swales. When you see a flat landscape, that's not what this used to be. This used to be ups and downs. So we're trying to mimic that on the Sandhill Crane wetlands. And are we going to get it perfect? No, but we're trying the best we can based on what we know about the history, the geology, the vegetation of the area. So there's our design. This is a model that was run. So this is not an actual photo or image of now the red boundary are the Sandhill Crane wetland boundaries. And this is a model of, if that design were to be implemented, what would be the topography of the site. So you can see we've got the dunes, we've got the swales, but what I really want you to notice on the outside here are a lot of natural ups and downs. And we're trying to mimic that. So look up here, where it's been farmed for maybe hundreds of years. I don't know how long it's been farmed, but a long time, completely flat. We're trying to get back to a more up and down scenario at the Sandhill Crane wetlands. We broke ground in the fall of 2020. Bulldozers, lots of big machines out there. I forgot to thank our funders who really paid for this. The Ohio EPA, 2 different grant programs, Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funded this project, multi-million-dollar project to restore this habitat. We could not do it. TNC is not paying for all of this. We got big grants to get it to do this, and with our partners in the Green Ribbon Initiative. So it's a very expensive thing to do this, but a great thing. Here's one of the scrapes that the bulldozers left for us. We're not talking about real deep wetlands. It could be when I'm standing in one of these depressions, it seems to me that from the bottom of the depression to the tallest dune, somewhere between 8 and 10 feet. So it's not a huge change in elevation, but you'd be shocked at how much 8 or 10 feet can change whether it's going to be wet or dry all year round. This picture was taken by Metro Parks Toledo. They were up doing their oak wilt surveys in helicopters, and they took this photo for us. And it really shows you, this was just as the site was just starting to revegetate, but nothing had been seeded out there. And you can see these dunes really stand out. Here's some of the drainage tile I mentioned. They mapped 30 miles of drainage tile that was out there. Our crews and the engineering crews were out there grabbing what they could. Others were just sort of left in place but broken as much as possible so that it wouldn't drain off of the property. So I'm kind of switching gears now into how do we actually get the plant community we're looking for and the animal community we're looking for. One of the things we have to do is a lot of seed collection. So our crews collected hundreds and hundreds of pounds of seed by hand and with a seed harvester, which in this picture is being towed behind one of our UTVs. We take that seed to Blue Creek Nursery. We could not do what we do without Blue Creek Nursery. I've been working very closely with them since I got here, and we have a long-standing history of working with Blue Creek Nursery. They are fantastic. I have been to professional for-profit nurseries, and I've never seen anything like what Blue Creek has going on. They are amazing. So we really appreciate their help. Basically, what we do is we can't clean. We don't have the manpower. We also don't have the equipment to clean all the seed ourselves. And the seed needs to be cleaned before you can drill it into the ground so it can germinate. So we collect it in various methods, take it over to Blue Creek. They help us clean it. We volunteer hours, hundreds of hours to help them clean it for us, and we help them. And then they give it back to us in nice, clean seed in big bags, heavy, hundreds of pounds of bags. And then here we're mixing the seed back together. We're mixing it into a wetland mix for the depressional areas and upland mix on the dunes and in the more dry parts of the site. So we're mixing with trash cans. We take those trash cans and then we put those things into the back of this big hopper. This thing gets towed behind a tractor. And these things down here at the bottom in between the wheels are the actual seed drills. These will drill down, I don't know the exact depth, but based on my looking at it, it looks like it's anywhere between like 3 and 6 inches deep. And it'll drill it down there. That's much better. You're going to have much better germination if you drill the seed in than if you just broadcast it by hand or spread it around off the back of a tractor. So we did as much seed drilling as we could. We borrowed the seed drill from Metro Parks Toledo. Again, are you seeing a trend? We're friends with Metro Parks Toledo. So we dragged this behind the tractor, and here is a farmer that we actually contracted out to do the work for us because at the time we didn't have the personnel to actually run this tractor and run the seed drill ourselves. So we contracted that out. Over 350 species of plants were planted out there in 2021 and 2022. about 200 species of wetland plants and about 170 species of upland, and some were overlapping between the two. So 350, that's a lot of plants that we seeded out there at a high seeding rate. I think you might not want to quote me on this, but I think it was like 8 pounds per square meter, because we assume that the being it might even be, could it be per square foot? It was a high seeding rate because we assume there's almost no seed bank in those soils that have been farmed for generations. So we're trying to start from scratch. And Blue Creek Nursery, they just they love collecting seed, they love cleaning seed, and so they just really wanted to. They encouraged us to plant a very high seed rate. So that would also kind of flood out. Another advantage is it sort of floods out the competition from invasive plants. If you put a lot of native seed out there, these are all natives, of course. This is roughly where the tractor went and planted in our wet prairie and our upland prairie. The wet being historically where the site was more wet on the left, on the west side, and the upland being closer to the east side and the central of the property. Of course, like, did the tractor go exactly along these lines? Probably not, but pretty close. And in general, most of the dunes are in that upland prairie mix. It's a wetland. We want to keep it a wetland. We can't seed everything. We couldn't get the tractor into all the wettest parts. And there are certain places we wanted to put plants that Blue Creek actually thought that it would be better if we started them in pots and then planted those plugs or pots and then planted them later. So we actually went out in the fall of 2021, planted a bunch of rare sedges, especially right out in front of the observation area. A bunch of flowers. I don't have the list in front of me, but a lot of different species were planted by plugs as well. And in some cases, not always when it was this wet, but this day was particularly wet. In the spring of 2020, so this would be a little bit less than a year ago, we made our observation deck. How many people have been there along Angola Road? So I encourage you to go out and enjoy it. There's just a small trail now. I was talking to Barry earlier. I know there's some interest in having a trail that goes out into the field. First, that's not my decision. That's higher up than me. Also, I think there's some interest wanting to see how the site develops for a couple of years, see where the wetlands are going to be, see what plants are coming up, see where people want to go and where the interesting plants might be. I have a feeling down the line there might be an option for a trail. Right now, that's on hold. I'm not going to say it's a no, but it's also not my call. So, but we've heard interest, and people above me and TNC have heard interest about a trail. So we know that's something that would be desired. So so we put in the split rail fence in the last photo. We put in 2 benches. We put in some interpretive signs that the communications team helped us make. We have a great communications team, and we think it looks really nice. And now that the vegetation is up, it's looking even better in our opinion. Here's my supervisor, Alexis. I want to give her a big shout out. She has been huge in this project. She helped manage the grant from pretty early on after getting it, and she's put a lot of work into this project. And she's next to you'll see this sign right at the parking lot leading down to the observation area. Rick Bryan, I know he's a big part of the TNA. He helped us, along with a few other volunteers, helped us plant some trees by the observation area. We planted 15 oaks. Right now, that's all the trees we're planning on planting just near the observation area to create a little bit of a savanna look. There's debate about whether we're going to plant any trees on the site at all. Right now, there are actually no plans to plant more trees out there because we want to create that wet prairie. If you go back to that Brewer and Van Cat paper of 2004, they said that historic wet prairie in this region had almost no trees, like less than 1 tree per acre. So if we did plant trees out there, we want to do it in a very limited way. We have also talked about maybe there could be some sites like already right next to the woods. If we wanted to plant trees, we would plant them close to existing would not, so we wouldn't, I know as a biologist, I know that you don't want to fragment habitat like this. It's as if are there any bird watchers here? So so birders know that you want big contiguous areas. So if we did plant any trees, it wouldn't be like right in the center and sort of fragmenting it. It would be off to the sides. But right now, these are the only trees that we have out there for the moment. We had a grand opening last May. Here's Terry Seidel talking. We had our state director up. We had a few of our partners speak. And thank goodness we had a Sandhill Crane fly by and visit us on that day during this ceremony. No word yet how much we paid that Sandhill Crane to show up. So how's it looking? I've talked everything up till now has been like background, but what's going on out there now? Last spring, seeds that we planted and everything that we planted started to come up. We also did plant a cover crop in there. We mixed in some ryegrass to hold the soil in and it was recommended that we don't just plant natives. I actually don't truly understand all the idea behind that, but we mixed in ryegrass with it. I think one of the big reasons was to avoid, especially on the dunes, was to avoid erosion. The ryegrass would come up quickly. These native things take a lot longer to get established. So if we could get the cover crop up early, it would hold the soil in place better than if we just had the native seeds. Grass starts to grow, flowers start to grow. Oh my gosh, how are we going to manage this site? We need to mow, we need to burn. What are we going to do? The dunes, they're still looking a little sparse. If you've been out there recently, they are still a little sandy. We're hoping that this year of growth, this next summer will be the second year of growth after we've seeded. We're hoping that some of those seeds that we germinated will take root and will hold the soil in place, because we don't want those dunes blowing around. In this picture, you can see some of that ryegrass we planted, but we're not seeing, we want to see more of the grasses we seeded growing on those dunes. We still got wetlands, that's great. We actually have a water control structure right off of Rab Road, which allows us to monitor, lower and raise the water level. The only reason we want to lower the water level is when we were doing construction. Now we put all the boards back in there's these 5 boards in there. We put them all in, and we want to keep as much water on this site as possible. Lots of mowing. The plan currently is to mow for this year, next year, and possibly the next year, the whole thing, except for maybe a few of the dunes and maybe some sites that are too wet. Mow as much as we possibly can, because what we're trying to do is knock down any early colonizers, like a lot of cottonwood. Tons of cottonwood is coming in, and we don't want a forest full of cottonwood. So we're trying to mow that down, down some of the early pioneering weedy species. That's not gonna, this mowing, especially we're doing it in fall, winter, and before early spring germination. So we're doing it like now. We just finished most of our mowing. And the plan is to mow for these next couple of years and then probably go into rotational mowing. We might mow like half the site 1 year and then half the site the next year, or we might do a third of the site and then like rotate every 3 years. We're actually in talking to Metro Parks Toledo and some of our other partners, there's been more of an urge recently to mow more often and not do a third, and actually to mow like a half each year until we can burn again. It would be great to see fire rolling across this prairie. Not yet, but I mean, we're not there yet, but hopefully in a few years we might be burning instead of mowing, which would be far more beneficial. It releases nutrients into the soil. It does a better job of killing the invasive plants. So fire is ideal. In the absence of fire, we have to mow. Invasive plants are out there. Fortunately, not too much. We did a lot of looking around for them, and mostly we're seeing narrow leaf cattail near the water, and some of the non-native clovers. We're spraying those with herbicide, but we're really pleased that we did not need to use a lot of herbicide to kill the invasives last year, and I don't think it's going to be too bad this year. So that was the all sort of lead up. And I said I was going to get to ask you questions, so now I'm going to sort of turn the table a little bit. I know we're here in the Toledo Naturalist Association. We're all naturalists. So what species are we seeing out there? That's what I want to know. Here's two of the species, two aster species. Does anybody know what they are? New England on the left and sky blue aster on the right. I'm a bird biologist, so you guys, many people in this room probably know more about plants than I do, but I do know some of these plants. Two others we got. Lupin on the right, on the left. I think I heard vervain. Is it? I think it's blue vervain, not, you said hoary vervain, but I could be wrong. I stole it off the internet anyway, so I think it's blue vervain. So yeah, beautiful flowers out there. If you're familiar with blue lupin, you know that, and Carner blue butterfly, you know that it's the host plant for the Carner blue. Last time we saw Carner blue was 2019 on Kitty Todd. I don't think we had any in 2020, but I might be wrong. I know we didn't have any 21, 22. So we're hoping that if we plant more lupin out there and we encourage more lupin, that we'll, if there are Carner blues still out there, we'll provide habitat for them. How about these two? Cardinal flower on the left. Who said sneezeweed? Oh, that guy knows his plants. Sneezeweed. It does, to me, it looked a lot like gray-headed coneflower too, but sneezeweed. So we got those germinating out there. How about these two? I heard it. Somebody said it. Dotted horse mint. Another botanist amongst us. Dotted horse mint on the left and on the right. I don't think it's Gerardia. I think if I'm pretty, any other guesses? Purple false foxglove. You don't think so? This is not only did the person who took this photo label it as such, but then I looked it up later, and so I could be wrong. I am not a botanist, but we do have purple false foxglove. It was planted out there, and we do have it on the preserve. I went out with Terry and Ben Baumlitz, our preserve coordinator, just a few back in the fall. We found two places where purple false foxglove is coming up, where we didn't plant it, where it's just coming up naturally. So that's nice to know that it's out there. And then these are pretty easy. Butterfly milkweed, and I think it's common milkweed on the right hand side. And the milkweeds are the host plant for monarch butterflies. So we hope we'll provide a lot of habitat for the monarch butterflies too. All right, now we're switching taxa. We're going to insects. Who knows their caterpillars? Do we have any guesses on caterpillars? Black swallowtail on the left. This was found right over by the observation area on its host plant on one of the carrots, I think it was Queen Anne's lace probably. And on the right, it's Viceroy. There's another one. There's a couple that look like, well, maybe there's more than a couple that look like bird droppings, but the one that I kept on trying to compare it to was red spotted purple. My wife and I have recently got into caterpillars. We just bought that new book and we're really loving it. That's Viceroy. So that was on Cottonwood, but so we've got some butterflies out there. We have cameras that are put up by our engineering firm, the Mad Scientists. So we know we have a deer on the right. I don't know if you can see up here. There's some glowing eyes, evil glowing eyes staring at you. That's a coyote there. And then this isn't going to show up very well, but down here, I don't know if anybody can see this. There is a bird with blue wings and an orange back. That is an American kestrel, and that was captured on these cameras. We have 3 or 4 of these stationary cameras that are out there filming. I think every few seconds they're taking a photo. And fortunately, we don't have to sort through all of them. The engineering firm does that for us. We have some frogs out there. We only installed this, and a few weeks later, we had this little frog. We know it's a tree frog because it's climbing. Which species? Gray tree frog, because I used to live in the South, because green tree frogs aren't here. So gray tree frog, but which can be gray and brown and green and all sorts of different colors. Two different species. As far as I know, you can't tell the two gray tree frog species apart except by sound, right? Copes and gray. I do some frog surveys. So copes, I've heard both. I've heard the gray and I've heard the copes. Is that true? We have both of the gray tree frogs, right? Okay, just checking. All right, so moving on to my specialty, birds. I've been a birder since I was a kid. I know many of you guys are birders, and we're seeing a lot of great birds stopping through during migration, like these white pelicans. Like these, maybe some of you were lucky enough to go out and see these in the fall of 2021. What are these? Godwits, Hudsonian godwits. I was looking up their range maps this morning, and my gosh, these guys go all the way from the tip of Argentina and Chile, all the way up to northern Canada into the Arctic Circle. I don't know how many thousands of miles it is. And they stop through here in Swanton, Ohio to have a bite to eat. So we really appreciate them stopping by. And I hope you guys had a chance to stop by and see the Hudsonian godwits. They were making quite a splash. My background is grassland birds, so I can't do a presentation without throwing in some grassland birds. Anybody know what's on the left? Dickcissel on the left, beautiful black bib, lots of yellow, brown, rusty wings. This is the male. And on the right, grasshopper sparrow, flat forehead. It sounds like some kind of buzzy insect. Zzz. And they're breeding out there because we see them for many weeks in a row, and that is good enough indication for us and for the breeding bird survey that they are breeding out there. How about this? Bobolink on the left, beautiful yellow on the back of the neck. Oh, I love the black wings and the contrasting white patches on the wings. We have bobolink breeding out there, and we have horned larks breeding out there too, which is pretty cool. Like I thought that it would be too grassy actually, but they must be finding someplace because they are consistently out there all summer long. This is a nice male with the little horns popping up, the feather horns popping up. And who knows what this is? Not small-eared, short-eared owl, but very close. Either small and short, very similar. I knew this bird was going to be out there, and my wife and I went down on New Year's Day this past New Year's Eve, and we waited till sunset. If you go out and you go to here, or somebody was just saying earlier tonight that if you go out to McGee Marsh, there's some short-eared owls. If you go up the road into Michigan, Point Mouillet, you get short-eared owls, and they're around. They're actually not that uncommon. I looked it up. I was surprised to find out short-eared owls are not listed as threatened or endangered even on the state lists. But they're super hard to find. You have to go out at sunset or at sunrise, and so I knew they were going to be out there, and we were able. It was almost dark, and we found this owl, and then I put it on eBird, and when like a whole bunch of people have followed and found the owl. I'm really glad. How many of you guys have gone out to see the short-eared owl? Fantastic. I'm glad. And are there really? So now my question is, when are you going to find me a snowy owl? I want to get a snowy out on Sandhill Crane Wetlands. What are you guys going to do? So I really do think that. Oh, was it? Okay, you just didn't put it on eBird. So I really do think that Sandhill Crane Wetlands is going to be a good site for snowy owls. It just might not be the perfect year for them. Maybe it's not a great eruption year. I'm not quite sure, but I think it's going to be we'll get them out there eventually.
Why do you think that?
I just think that the open, expansive area that grasses, wetlands, we have a lot of waterfowl out there. They like to eat waterfowl. Every airport around here gets them. And if the airports get them, then we should have some too. In my experience, I think this is going to be good snowy habitat, not every year for certain, but I would be kind of surprised if like 10 years from now, we haven't had some reports out there. So lastly, Sandhill Cranes. We've seen them out there, they're migrating through, they're stopping and feeding. I've seen as many as 10 or 20 fly by. I've seen on eBird, and I've heard other people say they've seen over 100 fly by, which is fantastic. We hope that one day they'll be nesting out there. We know that they're nesting over by Lake Erie. We know that they're nesting, they might be nesting either on Secor or on some other metro park not far from here. I was talking to Lorraine about this, and I can't remember which park she said they have a nesting pair of Sandhill Cranes on one of these parks near here. So we know they're nesting around here. I think it's only a matter of time before we get the Sandhill Cranes. That was why we named it the Sandhill Crane Wetlands, because we want to encourage Sandhill Cranes to breed there. There are fewer, as far as I know, there are fewer than 100 nesting pairs of sandhills in the state of Ohio. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's a little bit over 100 at this point, but there's not too many. So we're hoping that this will be a great spot for Sandhill Cranes to breed. That's all I have to say. I want to thank you for your attention. I want to encourage you to come out to Kitty Todd and the Sandhill Crane Wetlands and to explore and to enjoy. And I appreciate your attention. Thank you.
You said you did some soil testing out there. Now, when you do the soil testing, is that for your own information or you try to change the compound of the soil?
Mostly for our own information. I haven't specifically spoken to the soil scientists, but I think if we had a indication that there was something wrong with the soils, like way too much phosphorus loading, phosphorus or nitrogen, that we might have to deal with that. As far as I know, that we didn't have to do anything like chemically to deal with that. So, but I am actually out of my league here, so I'm going to say I don't know the answer to that. As far as I know, nothing like major was done to change the soil chemistry. I also forgot to mention that we didn't truck in any dirt from elsewhere. All the dirt for the dunes was pushed and out from the scrapes up onto the dunes. All the dirt was natural.
All the birds that you're seeing now, I've been going out to like twice a week now.
That's great. Thank you.
And especially the ducks, like, this is gonna be like, oh, we're gonna get a good list of ducks and go out and pick through them with the scope. But when you said that, okay, we're kind of trying to duplicate Irwin,
Right.
and I don't think of ducks when I think of Irwin Prairie.
Right.
So like all those pictures, like 10 years from now, do you anticipate seeing Hudsonian godwit there or curlew sandpiper? You know,
Did you find the curlew
that
sandpiper?
showed up at that field? I had black tern out there a few years ago.
Oh, that's cool.
So is it going to be a whole different? Is it going to be grassland birds?
We're going for wet prairie. Wet prairie is historically grassland and a lot of flowers and a lot of grasses and a lot of rushes and sedges. I think that 10 years from now, if we do it right, that western part that's historically got lots of water by Rab Road will stay wet. And I think we will have, especially none of us have seen how wet this site is going to be. This is the first year since we planted it that the boards are fully up and the water is going to be fully retained. So none of us have really seen how much water it's going to hold. We're trying to mow it and it's too wet to finish mowing because we're going to get our tractors stuck in the mud. So I think 10 years from now, we're going to see open water on a part of the western side. And then moving farther east, you're going to be moving more into a grassland setting, which is what we want. I understand that people do want ducks and shorebirds, but please understand we are trying to, like I said, trying to restore a wet prairie and upland prairie community out there. If we get those ducks, that's fantastic. If we don't, that's okay if we hit the target community that we're going for.
And the target community is those grassland birds?
More like grassland birds. I wouldn't mind if we got some marsh wrens. I wouldn't mind if we got,
Rails,
you know,
I would imagine.
or rails. Absolutely. Anything that's going to like wet grassland habitat, wet prairie. It's known as Lake Plain Wet Prairie because we're on the old lake shore of Lake Warren. But yeah, I don't think we're gonna see like the big open pools that we had when it was all farmed. However, I could be wrong because I've never seen the whole site with all the water control boards up and as much water as we can possibly keep on the site. So I have to answer like we'll have to see.
Well,
Yeah.
It's all
Yeah.
speculation.
Yeah. And I appreciate, I mean, I've been birding since I was 13. I appreciate the interest in the birds. I've come around to the community ecology side of things, and if you build it, it'll come. And yeah, we're just gonna have to see but we are shooting for that wet prairie and upland prairie communities. Yes.
There are additional opportunities for expansion. You're talking about wet areas. What's Ram Road gonna look like on the west side? And can the wetland expand, down the road?
There is, as I mentioned, Terry is constantly looking around to buy more property. If some property on the west side of Rab Road comes up for sale, I would not be surprised at all if he tries to buy it. So I think there is plan to expand it. They're continually looking around Kitty Todd. It's pretty patchy. If you looked at that map that I showed earlier, it's parcel here, parcel there, and then private land, and then parcel, private land, and it's real patchy. And we would love to get it more contiguous if we can. So I think they are going to try to look for opportunities. I don't know I think the Bettingers, who we bought the property from, are still farming some of that. And I don't know if they're interested in selling more of it. But yeah, there is a possibility for expansion. I don't know in which directions. Yeah.
Well, on the map, the one you showed to the north.
Yeah.
You showed it had more three-dimensional terrain.
Yeah.
So is that private property at this point? Is that potentially accessible to you?
Let's see. This one.
No, keep going. It was one you showed actually of the.
Or backwards.
Right there.
Oh.
That one, the property just to the north there.
This is all, oh, believe it or not, this is most of that is Metro Parks Toledo property, just not open to the public.
Oh,
If you go back to this slide, all that, so here's the Sandhill Crane Wetlands. That big yellow area is Metro Parks Toledo property that is not open to the public. So between us and Metro Parks Toledo, I think I can pretty safely say that if these areas came up for sale, we would be interested in buying them. I'm not in charge of acquisition, but if I were, I would strongly encourage them to fill in these gaps in this area, because in my experience in graduate school and with the work that I've done, and I see it all the time, contiguous connectivity and contiguous habitats are the way to go. We want to create corridors. We want to create big contiguous areas of habitat. Yeah.
Starting at Secor, going through Kitty Todd, down through Watergrass Lake, down through Wetlands, across Uber.
Yeah.
Through the Campbell Preserve, all the way down to Campbell Prairie Park.
That's fantastic.
That's coming soon.
Yeah.
That was just at the Metro Parks meeting.
That's great.
And, they're already talking about extending the trail, what's now the Mosley Trail, starting at Watergrass Lake, extending it south, heading to Kitty Todd, maybe within the next year or two.
That's fantastic. I've definitely heard about the trail coming to Kitty Todd.
Yeah.
I don't know all the details you just mentioned, but that's great news. I mean, look at all this yellow. This is all Metro Parks. And if you zoomed out, I don't have a zoomed out picture, but if you zoomed out, there's a lot of Metro Parks that, as I mentioned, that are not in the parks.
We have a question from Jackie Riley, who's watching online.
Hi, Jackie. She's one of our butterfly monitors. Thank you, Jackie.
She says, is any burning planned or hoped for this spring at Kitty Todd?
Not this spring, because logistically we just can't get all of our ducks in a row. But We are planning to do a couple of burns this fall. Whether we pull it off remains to be seen, but we're hoping to burn this fall, maybe the following spring, maybe the following fall. So we hope this fall.
Jackie says hi.
Hi, Jackie.
Yeah, it's Kitty Todd.
Yes.
Are there any plans to expand trails to those acres?
So I don't get to decide very much, actually. I just work here. So there are people who make these decisions. They've decided to keep 3 trails on Kitty Todd for now. The one, the Oak Savannah Trail, which starts near the office, and then it's a big loop, and it goes out to Cactus Loop and goes, comes back, and that's about between 1.25 and 1.5 miles. Then we have a small trail down at Salamander Flats, and then we have a tiny trail at this Sandhill Crane Wetlands. I think in the future there might be a trail out there, but for now, the powers that be have decided to keep 3 trails. We're a pretty small staff. I mean, like right now, we just have me and Ben Baumlitz working out there full time. We did hire another person to help us, so we have 3 people full time, but it's hard to keep up with all this stuff. So 3 trails is actually kind of hard to keep up with. So right now we're keeping it at 3, but there is potential for future trails in the.
Are you familiar with the Black Swamp Conservancy?
Yes. Isn't somebody from here in here very active with Black Swamp? Okay. Okay.
I was just saying, a lot of farmers are selling property or
Yeah.
giving it to them because they don't want anything to happen to their land. They don't want construction coming in or communities building and all
Yeah.
all that. So they're doing a lot of good work too.
They're doing great work. I just had a meeting with Rob Crane in this room a few weeks ago. So they're doing great work. I'm so happy to be affiliated with the Nature Conservancy, to be partnering with Black Swamp. And one of our grant specialists, I love when she says this, like we're the big dog. We're the Nature Conservancy. We're the largest land conservancy in the world, as far as I know, one of the top 3 land environmental organizations in the world. We are not trying to compete with folks like the Black Swamp. We're trying to help them any way we can, partner. Maybe we could get grants that they can't, maybe they're too small to get a big grant, but we could get a big grant and partner with them and help them buy land or restore land. So as much as we can, we try to partner with the little guys instead of try to compete with them.
Excellent.
I know you said you just work here and you don't make a lot of decisions. So I guess if you get, when you were talking about the question about trails and maintaining, Barry's talking about trails there and Sandhill Crane. I was out there 2 days ago. I was looking around, I go down to the ditch that goes on the angle like that. And then,
Yep.
you know, the parking lot, and then on the far east end, closer towards Schlumberger. And I was thinking myself that I would prefer not to have any trail. And maybe kind of observation tower type things like you would have out at Crossing Stanley Road. Get you closer so you can see, but you're not getting out there disturbing it, especially with the sand dunes on the eastern side. Like if people can, they're gonna go ahead and walk and, you know, stuff. So it's like I don't know. I kind of like the idea of just being able to view that area without kind of disturbing it with hiking around it. And from perspective of maintaining it, I don't know whether that would be better or worse on your end. Like, would that be harder to maintain a couple of spots where people can kind of get up and work out, or maintain a trail?
Yeah. Well, you can count me on the side of wanting trails through there. I've given my opinion, and that's as far as it went. So I'm not concerned about scaring the wildlife. I've worked in hundreds of different grasslands for my graduate research. The birds just do what they want to do. I'm not concerned about trampling. So I think it would be great to get, especially if we could find an area that doesn't get too wet, And especially if we don't have to build a huge boardwalk, because that could be really expensive. And maintaining a boardwalk is hard. I mean, storms and everything, you have to constantly maintain it. So I think it'd be wonderful, but in a limited way. I also agree with you entirely. We don't want to block the view. We don't want to, I was talking about habitat continuity. We want to keep it a big contiguous grassland. We don't want to make it, what do you call it? Like break it up into little pieces. So I think in a limited way, that would be great in the future.
I think I gotta get it out of the mindset of ducks. Start thinking about Henslows and grass.
Enzos have to be out there. I just can't, I'd be shocked if they're not out there already. You haven't heard them?
They will be there.
They will
I
be there.
actually, no, I think Matt Anderson did have Henslows last year.
Although I looked on eBird recently and I didn't see one, but maybe, I don't know if you put it in there. Yeah, I do think if you're really into ducks, go over to Lake Erie more
I don't
often.
wanna ride Lake Erie. Right in my backyard.
All right, well, I think that Barry is calling off. Thank you for your attention. Thanks for everybody online.
Thank you very much. If you have questions, Pete's going to be here for a few more minutes, so feel free to seek him out. George has some refreshments in the back, and we encourage you to stay and chat with one another. Thank you all for being here. Thank all of you on Zoom for being here. And also our recording will be available at a future date. So thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.